Now, every topic has a set of exceptions. In the case of modifiers, there is an exception with adverbial modifiers. Adverbial modifiers have an exception. And the adverbial modifiers in English are as, while, when, since, though, etc. These are the adverbial modifiers in English. I told you earlier, in a sentence an object is not necessary, may be there, may not be there. But a subject and a verb must be there in every sentence. If a sentence does not contain a subject or a verb, that sentence is grammatically wrong. Now the rule is this, listen. These words are called adverbial modifiers. Immediately after an adverbial modifier, right? Immediately after an adverbial modifier or immediately after the clause containing an adverbial modifier, the subject must appear. This is the rule. I'll give an example. So immediately after these words or immediately after the clause containing these words, the subject must appear. Now at the beginning, I went for a statement like when I went there, he was sleeping. When I went there, he was sleeping. I say that this sentence is grammatically correct and it makes sense. Come to the list of adverb modifiers. As, while, when, since, though, etc. When I went there, he was sleeping. When is an adverbial modifier. And immediately after the adverbial modifier when, we have this subject here, which is at I. So immediately after an adverb modifier, we have a subject. The exception is completely fine. The rule is completely fine. This one is grammatically correct. Got it? So immediately after these words, or immediately after the clause containing these words, the subject must appear. Now, these words appear in the main clause or subordinate clause? These words appear in the main clause or subordinate clause? I told you, subordinate clauses are termed as modifiers. And these words are called adverbial modifiers. So these words appear in the subordinate clause. So immediately after these words or immediately after the clause containing these words, the subject must appear. Now, come to the sentence. The first sentence. While riding a bicycle, my knees got hurt. Subject means a do of an action. While riding a bicycle, my knees got hurt. Two questions. Is this sentence grammatically correct? Does it make sense? Fine. First one, does it make sense or not? What is a modifier here? Subordinate clause. While riding a bicycle is a modifier here, subordinate clause. And the modifier comes very close to the word my knees. That means the modifier is modifying my knees. So we need to associate the word my knees with the modifier. While riding a bicycle, my knees means my knees were riding a bicycle. The same as the earlier rule. My knees were riding a bicycle. Do my knees ride a bicycle? No. My knees don't go and ride a bicycle. The sentence does not make sense. There itself eliminate. Now, do my legs ride a bicycle? Now, all of you know how to ride a bicycle, right? Do our legs ride a bicycle? No, our legs will not go and ride. We ride a bicycle. My legs don't ride a bicycle. I ride a bicycle. Your legs don't ride a bicycle. You ride a bicycle. I ride a bicycle with my legs because my legs are the instruments used by me to ride a bicycle. With instruments it is with. So I ride a bicycle with my legs. The sentence does not make sense. Eliminate. And the second question, grammatically correct or wrong? I say this sentence is grammatically wrong. While is an adverbial modifier. As I told you, immediately after an adverbial modifier or immediately after the clause containing an adverbial modifier, the subject must appear. Immediately after while, do we have a subject? No, leave it. Immediately after the clause containing while, do we have a subject? Where does the clause containing while end? The clause containing while ends with a comma. Immediately after clause containing while, do we have a subject? My niece. My niece got hurt. Understand meaning? My niece got hurt means my niece did the action or received the action? Received the action. Subject or object? Object. So immediately after while there is no subject. Immediately after the clause containing while also is no subject. This sentence is grammatically wrong. In the given sentence, what is subject? While riding a bicycle means bicycle is doing the action or receiving the action? Receiving the action. Object. My niece got hurt means my niece received the action. Object. There's no subject in the given sentence. I told you if a sentence does not contain a subject or a verb, that sentence is grammatically wrong. Eliminate. In fact, who must be riding a bicycle? I must be riding a bicycle. The correct sentence must be while I was riding a bicycle, comma, my niece got hurt. Started in the past, ended in the past, tense constancy is there. My niece got hurt means my niece were hurt. While I was riding a bicycle, comma, my niece got hurt. While is an adverbial modifier. Immediately after while we have a subject I, because I was riding a bicycle means I was doing the action. Subject. So while is an adverbial modifier. Immediately after while we have the subject I. Exception with adverb modifiers, grammatically correct. Now, while I was riding a bicycle, comma, my niece got hurt. Got hurt means were hurt. My niece got hurt means my niece were hurt. Which is the main clause here? My niece were hurt is the main clause here, right? My niece were hurt means my niece received the action. Object comes the beginning in the active. Object comes the beginning in the passive voice. Were hurt is verb plus V3. Hurt is V1, V2 and V3. Hurt, hurt, hurt. There's nothing like verb plus V1 or verb plus V2. It is verb plus V3. And verb plus V3 is the structure of simple past in the passive voice. This sentence is grammatically correct. It makes sense. It is in the passive voice. Now in this sentence, we have the subject I immediately after while. I repeat the rule. Immediately after these words or immediately after the clause containing these words, the subject must appear. We'll frame the same idea with the subject I immediately after the clause containing while. Come to the second one. While riding a bicycle, comma, I hurt my niece. While riding a bicycle is a clause containing while. And immediately after the clause containing while, we have the subject. What is that? I. So immediately after the clause containing while, the subject is there, grammatically correct. Now, what is the main clause here? Which one is the main clause here? I hurt my niece is the main clause here. The subject here is I. Hurt is the verb here. My niece is the object here. Subject, verb, object, active voice. These two sentences are grammatically correct. Both convey the same meaning. The only thing is, the first one is in the passive voice, the second one is in the active voice, subject, verb, object. Hurt is V2 here, because when you convert a sentence from one voice to the other, the tense and the category must remain the same. In the passive voice, simple past. In the active voice also, it must be simple past. So while I was riding a bicycle, comma, my niece got hurt, passive voice. While riding a bicycle, comma, I hurt my niece, active voice. Clear? And voice is only for a main clause, not for a subordinate clause. What if I say, while I was riding a bicycle, comma, I hurt my niece, correct? This sentence is grammatically wrong because of redundancy. I told you, immediately after these words or, not and, or immediately after the clause containing these words, the subject must appear. If I say, while I was riding a bicycle, comma, I hurt my niece, the subject I is used twice, error with redundancy. Fine? Right. Come to these three sentences. I'll tell you an idea first. I'll tell you an idea and we'll see which of these three sentences conveys my idea. My idea is this, listen. Shruti was 16 years old, right? Shruti was 16 years old. Shruti applied to JNTU. JNU, yeah. Shruti applied to the JNU. Even though Shruti was only 16 years old, the JNU accepted her application. right? This is my idea. Even though Shruti was only 16 years old, the JNU accepted her application. Clear? So which of these three sentences conveys my idea? I'll read the sentences first. Though only 16, comma, the JNU accepted Shruti's application. Though only 16, comma, Shruti's application was accepted by the JNU. Though Shruti was only 16, comma, her application was accepted by the JNU. My idea is Shruti was only 16. Even though she was only 16, the JNU accepted her application. That's my idea. Come to the first one. Though only 16, comma, the JNU accepted Shruti's application. Which is a modifier here? Which clause is a modifier? The first one. Though only 16 is the subordinate clause here. So this is the modifier. The modifier comes very close to the word the JNU. So we need to compare the word JNU with the modifier. Though only 16, the JNU means the JNU was only 16. Will the JNU be 16 or 18? No. Does not make sense, and most importantly, my idea is not getting conveyed. Right? Option, this sentence is eliminated. Come to the next one. Though only 16, comma, Shruti's application was accepted by the JNU. The modifier here is though only 16. The modifier comes very close to which word? Shruti or Shruti's application? Shruti cannot be taken as a word here because of the apostrophe. Shruti's application is the word here. So modifier comes very close to Shruti's application. I repeat, Shruti cannot be taken as a word here because of the apostrophe. Shruti's application is a word here. The modifier comes very close to Shruti's application. That means Shruti's application was only 16. As the meaning of this statement, Shruti's application was only 16. Can an application be 16 or 18? No, does not make sense. Eliminate. Come to the third one. Understand the meaning of every statement. Though Shruti was only 16, comma, her application was accepted by JNT, by the JNU. Though is an adverbial modifier. Though is an adverbial modifier. Immediately after though, we have the subject Shruti. The exception with adverb modifiers, completely fine. This sentence is grammatically correct and this makes sense. Though Shruti was only 16 means who was only 16? Shruti was only 16. Though is an adverbial modifier. Immediately after though, we have the subject Shruti. The exception with adverbial modifiers. This sentence makes sense and is grammatically correct. So though Shruti was only 16, comma, her application was accepted by the JNU. Getting it? Come to the next one. Come to the first statement. While walking back home, comma, a statue was seen by me. Two questions. Is it grammatically correct? Does it make sense? The modifier here is while walking back home. Subordinate clause. The modifier comes very close to a statue. So we need to associate a statue with the modifier. While walking back home, comma, a statue means a statue was walking back home. Will a statue walk back home? No. The sentence does not make any sense. Option, this sentence is eliminated. In fact, who must be walking back home? I must be walking back home. Come to the second one. While I was walking back home, comma, a statue was seen. Was seen means was seen by me. By me is not required here. It's understood because when I walk back home only I can see the statue. So by me is not required here. By me is understood here. While I was walking back home, comma, a statue was seen. While is an adverbial modifier. Immediately after while we have the subject I. Exception with adverbial modifiers. Grammatically correct. Makes sense. Right. Now, which is the main clause here? While I was walking back home is the main clause or a statue was seen as the main clause? A statue was seen as the main clause. A statue was seen means a statue was seen by me. By me is understood here. A statue was seen means a statue received the action, object. Was seen is was plus V3. Was plus V3 is simple past in the passive voice. So this sentence is in the passive voice. Right? Leave it there. So in this sentence, we have the subject I immediately after while. We'll frame the same idea with the subject I immediately after the clause containing while. While walking back home, comma, I saw a statue. While walking back home is a clause containing while. And immediately after the clause containing while, we have the subject I, grammatically correct. The same meaning. The main clause here is I saw a statue. I saw a statue means I is a subject here, saw is a verb here, a statue is the object here, subject, verb, object, active voice. And saw is V2, V1 and V2 will never come in the passive voice. Both the sentences are grammatically correct. Both come with the same meaning. The only thing is this one is in the passive voice, this one is in the active voice. While walking back home or when walking back home? While walking back home. In the idea containing when, ing cannot appear. I told you in the exceptions on tenses. In the idea containing while, ing can appear. In the idea containing when, ing cannot appear. So when walking back home is wrong usage. It must be while walking back. Got it? The next one. Understand the meaning. At the age of 10, comma, my family moved to Mumbai. At the age of 10, comma, my family moved to Mumbai. Which is a modifier here? At the age of 10 is a modifier here, subordinate clause. And the modifier comes very close to my family. That means the modifier is modifying my family. At the age of 10, my family means my family was at the age of 10. Can my family be at the age of 10 or 15? No. Does not make sense. Eliminated. In fact, who must be at the age of 10? I must be at the age of 10. Come to the next sentence. When I was at the age of 10, who was at the age of 10? I. When I was at the age of 10, comma, my family moved to Mumbai. When is an adverbial modifier. Immediately after when, we have the subject I, exception with adverbial modifiers, grammatically correct, makes sense. When I was at the age of 10, comma, my family moved to Mumbai. That means I was the age of 10. Getting it? Now we can find the errors and modifiers in newspapers as well. You know that Delhi gang rape happened, right? The repair case. At the time, Jaya Bachchan cried at the Assembly of Parliament. The Hindu reported that news actually. The Hindu reported news. The meaning of the sentence the Hindu framed was that Jaya Bachchan cried as the gang rape happened at the assembly. We know what the meaning is. The gang rape happened, Jaya Bachchan cried at the assembly. But the meaning of the sentence the Hindu framed was that Jaya Bachchan cried as the gang rape happened at the assembly. It was an error with modifiers. It's all about word order. When the order in which the words are arranged changes, the meaning of a sentence gets completely changed. Right? So while framing a sentence, you have to make sure that you're framing the words in the correct order. Only then the idea that is there on your mind gets conveyed through a sentence that you frame. Right? The reader must be able to understand exactly what idea you have on your mind. Exactly what meaning you want to convey. Fine? The next one. Come to the first statement. On entering the room, comma, a girl was found hanging from the ceiling. Makes sense on, is it grammatically correct? Does it make sense? Right. On entering the room, comma, a girl was found hanging from the ceiling. A girl was found means a girl did the action or received the action. A girl was found means a girl received the action, object. Fine. The modifier, the subordinate clause here is on entering the room. This is a modifier. And the modifier comes very close to a girl. That means the modifier is modifying a girl. So on entering the room, a girl means a girl was entering the room. Clear? On entering the room, a girl means a girl was entering the room. On entering the room, comma, a girl was found hanging from the ceiling. What am I hanging from the ceiling? Jumping and catching the ceiling? No. Suicide. Right. On entering the room, comma, a girl was found hanging from the ceiling. I repeat. The modifier here is on entering the room, comes very close to a girl. That means a girl was entering the room. Clear? According to the sentence, where is the girl right now? She is hanging from the ceiling. Right. So what is the meaning of this sentence? Makes sense or not? On entering the room, the girl means the girl was entering the room. And as per sentence, the girl was hanging from the ceiling. So what is the meaning getting conveyed by this sentence? The meaning of this statement is, when the girl entered the room, she saw herself hanging from the ceiling. Possible? It may be possible in some horror movies and all, but in reality it's not possible. Does not make sense. Eliminate it. One more question. What subject here? A girl was found means a girl is the object here. There's no subject in this sentence. This sentence is grammatically wrong, because every sentence must contain a subject. Eliminate it. Come to the second one. On entering the room, comma, we found a girl hanging from the ceiling. On entering the room is the modifier, comes very close to we. That means we were entering the room and found a girl hanging from the ceiling. Make sense? Yes. So on entering is a modifier. It comes very close to we. That means we were entering the room and we found a girl hanging from the ceiling. Which is the main clause here? We found a girl hanging from the ceiling is the main clause here. The subject here is we. Found is a verb here. A girl is the object here. Subject, verb, object, active voice. Fine. It makes sense. It is grammatically correct. Come to next one. When we entered the room, comma, a girl was found hanging from the ceiling. When we entered the room means who entered the room? We entered the room and we saw a girl hanging from the ceiling. That's a meaning. When is an adverbial modifier, and immediately after when we have the subject we, exception with adverb modifiers, grammatically correct. When we were entering the room is wrong. When cannot be followed by ing. When we entered the room, comma, a girl was found hanging from the ceiling. Which is a main clause here? A girl was found hanging from the ceiling is the main clause here. A girl is the object. Was found is was plus V3. Was plus V3 is simple past in the passive voice. These two sentences are grammatically correct. Both convey the same meaning. The only thing is the first one is in the active voice, the second one is in the passive voice. If I say, when we entered the room, we found a girl hanging from the ceiling, becomes an error with redundancy. That subject we is getting used twice, right? So on entering the room, comma, we found a girl hanging from the ceiling. Grammatically correct, makes sense. When we entered the room, comma, a girl was found hanging from the ceiling. Grammatically correct, makes sense. The same meaning, the only thing is one is in the active voice, one is in the passive voice. The next one. Sitting at the table, comma, the coffee was waiting for us. Now anyway, it does not make sense, because the coffee will not wait for us. If you keep the coffee here and call me, I say 5 minutes. Should we say the coffee is waiting for me? No. I can wait for the coffee. Coffee cannot wait for me. Right. Now, sitting at the table means what? Near the table. Sitting on the table, you know. Sitting at the table means near the table, next to the table, adjacent to the table, beside the table. Right. Sitting at the table, comma, the coffee was waiting for us. The modifier here is sitting at the table, subordinate clause. And the modifier comes very close to the coffee. So modifier is modifying the word the coffee. So sitting at the table, the coffee means the coffee was sitting at the table. Will the coffee sit at the table? No. Does not make sense. Eliminate it. Will the coffee sit on the table? No. The coffee will never sit or stand actually. Right? Now we should not go for literal translations from one language to the other. In Malayalam, my mother tongue, if coffee is there on the table, in Malayalam we say coffee table il irikkunnu. Irikkunnu in English means sitting actually, right? Sitting. So if coffee is there on the table, in Malayalam we say coffee table il irikkunnu. Irikkunnu means sitting. So in English should I say coffee is sitting on the table? I should not say coffee is sitting on the table, because coffee will never sit or stand. We should never go for such literal translations from one language to the other. It must be the coffee is on the table. The coffee will never sit on the table or sit at the table. Eliminate it. In fact, who must be sitting at the table? We, because I said waiting for us. So we must be sitting at the table. So the word we must come close to the modifier. Only then the sentence makes sense. Come to second one. Sitting at the table, comma, we were waiting for the coffee. The modifier here is sitting at the table, and the modifier comes very close to be. That means the modifier is modifying the word we. Sitting at the table, we means we were sitting at the table and waiting for the coffee. This one makes sense, must be considered. Sitting at the table, we means we were sitting at the table and waiting for the coffee. Got it? Come to the next one. 3 sentences. I'm not telling you the idea. We'll just read these 3 and see which one of these 3 makes sense. Leave the third one. Come to the first. Having scored high marks, my teacher appreciated me. Having scored, no, I'm having high marks means I'm eating high marks. That is wrong. Having scored high marks is correct. Having broken the glass, having taught you, having gone there, having spoken to them, all these are fine. Come to the second one. Having scored high marks, I was appreciated by my teacher. Come to the first sentence. Having scored high marks, my teacher appreciated me. Which is a modifier here? Subordinate clause. The modifier here is having scored good marks. This is a subordinate clause, modifier. And the modifier comes very close to my teacher. So modifier is modifying the word my teacher. Having scored high marks, my teacher means my teacher scored high marks, right? My teacher scored high marks. My teacher must be scoring high marks, or I must be scoring high marks? I must be scoring high marks and not my teacher. So sentence does not make sense. Eliminate it. Come to the next one. Having scored high marks, I was appreciated by my teacher. Having scored high marks is the modifier here, subordinate clause, and the modifier comes very close to I. So having scored high marks, I means I scored high marks. Make sense? Yes. I scored high marks and got appreciated by my teacher. Makes sense, must be considered. Which is the main clause here? I was appreciated by my teacher is the main clause here. I repeat, voice is only for a main clause. I was appreciated by my teacher is a main clause here. By comes only in the passive voice. I was appreciated means I received the action. Object. Was appreciated is the verb here. My teacher is the subject here. Object, verb, subject, passive voice. Leave it there. Come to the next one. As I scored high marks, my teacher appreciated me. As is an adverbial modifier, and immediately after the adverbial modifier as, we have the subject I, exception with adverbial modifiers, grammatically correct. Now, which is a main clause here? My teacher appreciated me is the main clause here. My teacher appreciated me means my teacher did the action, subject. My teacher appreciated me means I received the action, object. Appreciate is a verb here, subject, verb, object, active voice. Both the sentences are grammatically correct. Both convey the same meaning. The only thing is, this one is in the passive voice, this one is in the active voice. If you can identify one more rule here, as is a cause and effect indicator. I gave in the list of cause and effect indicators. Every cause and effect indicator must connect a reason and a result. And it's always a positive reason and a positive result, or negative reason and a negative result, always. As I scored high marks, my teacher appreciated me. What is the reason here? I scored high marks is the reason here, and my teacher appreciated me is the result here. If I ask you, why did my teacher appreciate me? The reason is I scored high marks. So I scored high marks is the reason. My teacher appreciated me is the result. The reason here is positive. The result is also positive. The concept of cause and effect indicators is completely fine. Connecting a positive reason and a positive result, that is also fine. Grammatically correct. Makes sense. Getting it? The next one. Come to these 4 sentences. Come to the first 3. My question is, leave the last one. This one you leave. My question is, which of these 3 sentences makes sense? My legs were caught on the stairs. You know what is meant by caught on the stairs, right? While walking, our legs can get caught somewhere. We stumble and fall down. Our shirt can get caught. A shirt can get torn. Hands can get caught. Right. My legs were caught on the stairs, comma, carrying a heavy pile of books. You know what pile of books, right? Stack of books. Carrying a heavy pile of books, comma, my legs were caught on the stairs. Carrying a heavy pile of books, comma, my hands were caught on the stairs. Come to the first one. My legs were caught on the stairs, comma, carrying a heavy pile of books. The modifier, the subordinate clause here is carrying a heavy pile of books. Modifier. And the modifier comes very close to the word the stairs. That means the modifier is modifying the word the stairs. So this sentence must be read only this way. The stairs, we need to associate the modifier with the word coming close to it. So we should read this sentence this way. The stairs carrying a heavy pile of books. The stairs carrying a heavy pile of books means the stairs were carrying a heavy pile of books. Will the stairs carry a heavy pile of books? No, does not make sense, so eliminate it. Come to the second one. Carrying a heavy pile of books, comma, my legs were caught on the stairs. The modifier here is carrying a heavy pile of books. And the modifier comes very close to my legs. So modifier is modifying my legs. Carrying a heavy pile of books, my legs means my legs were carrying a heavy pile of books. Do my legs carry a heavy pile of books? No. Does not make sense. Eliminate it. Come to the third one. Carrying a heavy pile of books, comma, my hands were caught on the stairs. The modifier here is carrying a heavy pile of books. The modifier comes very close to my hands. So we need to associate my hands with the modifier. Carrying a heavy pile of books, my hands means my hands were carrying a heavy pile of books. Do my hands carry a heavy pile of books? Think, make sense or not? Do my hands carry a heavy pile of books? No. My hands don't go and carry, I carry. I drive the car or my hands drive the car? My hands will not go and drive the car, I drive the car. I steer the car with my hands. My hands are the instruments used by me to steer the car. The meaning of this statement is my hands were carrying a heavy pile of books. My hands don't carry a heavy pile of books. Does not make sense. Eliminate it. Who must be carrying? I must be carrying. Right. Only then the sentence makes sense. Come to the last one. While I was carrying a heavy pile of books. Who was carrying? I was carrying. Make sense? While I was carrying a heavy pile of books, comma, my legs or my hands both are fine. My legs were caught on the stairs. The meaning of this statement is I was carrying a heavy pile of books. At the time my legs were caught on the stairs. While is an adverbial modifier. Immediately after while we have the subject I, exception with adverbial modifiers, grammatically correct, makes sense. As I told you, in the case of tier 1 and tier 2, there is no need for you to create any option. Applying these rules, find out the answer, that is your only task. Getting it? Okay. Come to the next statement. Adopted by a rich family, comma, high society was entered by Angela. Now Angela or Angela, anything is fine. A proper noun can be pronounced any way. The modifier here is adopted by a rich family. Subordinate clause, modifier. The modifier comes very close to high society. That means the modifier is modifying high society. Adopted by a rich family, high society means high society was adopted by a rich family. Can a rich family adopt a high society? No, does not make sense. Eliminate it. Now you know, in fact, who must get adopted? Angela must get adopted. Come to the second one. Adopted by a rich family, comma, Angela entered high society. Adopted by a rich family is the modifier, subordinate clause. The modifier comes very close to Angela. So modifier is modifying the word Angela. Adopted by a rich family, Angela means Angela was adopted by a rich family. Make sense? Yes. Angela was adopted by a rich family and she entered high society. This one is completely fine. Got it? Come to the next one. Come to the first sentence. While viewing the objects under a microscope, now we view objects under a microscope because the object will be under the microscope. While viewing the objects under a microscope, living things were discovered by Diana. Two questions. Is this sentence grammatically correct? Does it make sense? The modifier here is while viewing the objects under the microscope. This is a subordinate clause here, modifier. And the modifier comes very close to living things. So the modifier is modifying living things. So we need to associate living things with the modifier. While viewing the objects under the microscope, living things means living things were viewing the objects under a microscope. Living things were viewing the objects under microscope does not make sense. Eliminated. Now, they are itself eliminated. Grammatically correct or not? Now, living things were discovered means living things did the action or received the action? Received the action, object. Now, while is an adverbial modifier. As you know, immediately after an adverbial modifier or immediately after the clause containing an adverb modifier, the subject must appear. Immediately after while, we don't have a subject. Immediately after the clause containing while, do we have a subject? No. Living things is the object here. So immediately after while, no subject. Immediately after the clause containing while, also no subject. This sentence is grammatically wrong. Does not make sense. Eliminated. Come to option, the second sentence. While Diana was viewing the objects under microscope. Who was viewing the objects? Diana was viewing the objects. Makes sense. While Diana was viewing the objects under microscope, living things were discovered. Living things were discovered means discovered by her. By her is not understood here because when she views, only she can discover. So by her is understood here. While Diana was viewing the objects under microscope means who was viewing? Diana was viewing. While is an adverbial modifier. Immediately after while, we have the subject Diana. Exception with adverbial modifiers. Grammatically correct. Makes sense. Which is the main clause here? The main clause here is living things were discovered. Living things were discovered. Living things is the object here. Were discovered is verb plus V3. Simple past in the passive voice. Her is a subject, understood. Grammatically correct, makes sense, passive voice. So in this sentence, we have the subject Diana immediately after while. We'll frame the same idea with the subject Diana immediately after the clause containing while. Come to next one. While viewing the objects under microscope, Diana discovered living things. While viewing the objects under microscope is a clause containing while. And immediately after the clause containing while, we have the subject Diana. Exception with adverbial modifiers, completely fine, grammatically correct. The main clause here is Diana discovered living things. Diana discovered living things is a main clause here. Diana is a subject, discovered is a verb, living things is the object, subject, verb, object, active voice. Both the statements are grammatically correct. Both convey the same meaning. The only thing is this is in the passive voice, this is in the active voice. Getting it? Come to this one. My question is whether this sentence makes sense or not. Understand the meaning. Subject means a doer of an action or the noun or pronoun given primary importance in a sentence. Come to this. Built on 230 acres, the palace of Udaipur is one of the show places of Rajasthan. One of the show places or one of the show place? As you know, one of the boy, one of the girl, one of the book, all these are grammatically wrong. One of the boys, one of the girls, one of the students, all these are grammatically correct. So one of the show place is wrong, it must be one of the show places. Built on 230 acres, the palace of Udaipur is one of the show places of Rajasthan. The modifier here is built on 230 acres. This is the subordinate clause. And the modifier comes very close to the palace of Udaipur. So modifier is modifying the palace of Udaipur. Built on 230 acres, the palace of Udaipur means The palace of Udaipur is built on 230 acres. Make sense? The palace of Udaipur is built on 230 acres. It completely makes sense. There is nothing wrong in this statement. It makes sense, grammatically correct. So this is all about modifiers, right? I repeat, a subordinate clause is called a modifier in a sentence. To identify the modifier in a sentence, you just eliminate the main clause. Now, when you eliminate the main clause, what remains is a subordinate clause, and subordinate clause is called the modifier. A modifier always modifies a word that comes close to it. So when you take a sentence, identify the modifier in the sentence and associate the modifier with the word coming close to it, right? Modifiers can be words, phrases, or subordinate clauses. Phrase means a small group of words. There's an exception with adverbial modifiers: as, while, when, since, though, etc. Immediately after an adverbial modifier or immediately after the clause containing an adverb modifier, the subject must appear. And a sentence, if the exact subject is missing, we need to find out which the subject is. The exact subject in the sentence is. Every sentence must contain a subject and a verb. Clear? So make use of this tool in the case of sentence improvement and spotting the error to identify the error in a sentence. Make use of this concept in the case of reading comprehension, para jumbles, close test, and sentence completion to understand the meaning of every statement. Similarly, make use of the same rules, the same concepts we have discussed now in the case of writing to frame sentences that convey your ideas. Got it? Clear? Thank you.